Okay, thank you so much. Next slide, please. I want to remind us to breathe, that when we come into conversations around race, equity, policing, that we are very centered in our beings, that we are grounded. And one strategy to do this is to breathe deeply. And so I invite you to channel your baby bison, your baby bunny, whatever visual image that allows you to come into your body, to feel it grounded, to feel your feet firmly on the floor, and to feel the chair supporting your legs. When you're in your body, you can have conversations that can be emotional, and we can be grounded in ourselves and still have passion, still have fire, but come from a place of compassion, come from a place of our heart. And that's what I'm asking for when we're stepping into doing equity work, and when we're having wonderful, rich, heated conversations. The way to do that is to breathe, is to come back into your body. Placing your hand on your chest and on your stomach at the same time can also be a grounding effect. Holding yourself can be a grounding effect. And then counting to 10 before you speak. So I'm just reminding us of our baby bison. Next slide, please. I also want to remind us of the 4 levels of racism that we're always working within. The individual level, the interpersonal level, we as individuals are always getting messages from the media, from everywhere we turn, about who we are and how to be. And racism is baked into our system. Therefore, we get these messages day in and day out. We're working at the institutional level, which is your PAC commission and the board that you're trying to create. This is an institutional level that you're working at. And then we have systems and structures, which are laws and government agencies. And then we are all living inside of a culture and values of norms and beliefs that inform everything that we do. And so I'm just reminding us that we are working at multiple levels when we're doing this work. And that's why it can feel really tough sometimes. Next slide, please. I would love to have a volunteer, a commissioner, to read this slide for us. Walida Imarisha is an educator and director of the Center for Black Studies at PSU. She's a writer, scholar, and spoken word artist. Would someone like to volunteer to read this quote, please? Go ahead and raise your hand.
I see Tirsa raising her hand.
I see Tirsa. Yes, that would be lovely. Thank you, Tirsa.
I find it useful to talk about justice rather than just talk about diversity, because diversity at its worst is just getting folks in the room. Justice talks about what is the shape of this room? How does power function in that room? Who controls that room? Who owns that room? Whose input is valued in that room? And finally, how can we transform that room entirely? Walida Imarish.
Yes, thank you so very much, Tirsa. How do these words resonate with you, Tirsa?
Well, I guess what brings to mind is I often hear, like at my workplace, the word diversity being used often, but what does that look like, right? I guess that's like, what does that look like to me? And so I love this quote because it offers that insight. It doesn't mean just bringing people in the room. It's like it's more than that.
I love that. Thank you so very much for sharing, for letting me put you on the spot. I really appreciate that. Anyone else have reactions to this quote? Yes, Connie.
Yeah, I think it's a very important step and framework to really look at things from, because yes, you know, the words equity and inclusion became like very buzzy during the time, you know, in the last few years, specifically after George Floyd. And that is a nice, you know, sentiment and all, but I think the quote is really resonant with me because it is about looking at the room and creating justice, and not just using the word sort of like equity and inclusion in a performative sense. And in order to do that, we have to look at the container in which those things exist within.
Do you feel like you all are building the room? You're building the container.
Yeah, I think so. Slowly but surely, yes, we're building the container. Some containers have existed, so we're trying to take some examples and some things from those containers. But I guess, yes, holistically, we're building a new container.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Any other thoughts that resonate around this quote? We're trying to do it differently. That's the goal of this commission, is to do it differently. So wonderful. Thank you for the insights around this quote. So I am going to go to the next slide, please. And we're going to take a tour of why there aren't very many Black people in Oregon, a hidden history. And Walida is going to take us through that. Ayumidi, if you don't mind, stop sharing. I am going to share my screen because I'm going to share a video. And I want to make sure that I can do that. And if, yes, very good. Share that. So we're going to take, this is going to be about 20 minutes. And I would like for you to, as you're listening to this video, think about how the past is currently influencing your work as a commission. Thank you.
This timeline was created by Walida Imarisha to explore the history of race, identity, and power in Oregon, and also in the larger United States. If you need to read the slides more, you can always hit pause. There is also a version of this video available without the audio commentary. Though not properly documented, it is believed that there were Black people in Oregon as early as 1579, as part of Francis Drake's crew, which included at least 2 Black men and 1 Black woman, or even earlier as crew members of Spanish ships. The first well-documented Black person in Oregon was Marcus Lopez, who came as a member of Captain Robert Gray's crew in 1788. The most well-known Black man in Oregon was York, who was enslaved by Clark from the Lewis and Clark expedition. What is often not documented is that York was invaluable in securing diplomatic relations with Native communities who treated him with great respect. It's important to know that during the antebellum period, the greatest issue for this nation was slavery. Because slavery was not only a barbarous institution, but also an economic system, there were white people who were anti-slavery, but also anti-Black. This is the mentality that birthed Oregon. Even as a territory, Oregon outlawed slavery, but also banned Black people from moving here upon pain of public whipping every 6 months till they left. The land that Black folks were excluded from is land stolen from Native peoples through acts such as the 1850 Oregon Donation Land Act. Oregon was created as a white homeland. This is the actual language used to recruit people to move to Oregon. It was founded in a white nationalist fantasy of creating a white utopia void of any people of color. Oregon was in fact the only state to be admitted to the Union with a racially exclusionary clause that forbade Black people from moving to Oregon, owning real estate, or making contracts here. Black people who lived here had no legal standing and were undocumented. This exclusionary language was in Oregon's constitution until 2001, when Black leaders, community members, legislators, and allies were successful in finally having that language removed. So racist terrorist organizations like the Knights of the Golden Circle were not anomalies. They were only slightly more extreme than Oregon's mainstream institutions. This is proven by laws like the 1862 law, which created an annual tax for Black, Hawaiian, and Chinese people and so-called mulattoes living in Oregon. If they were unable to pay, they would be forced to work for the state. In 1865, the Civil War ended, and the 13th Amendment abolished slavery. However, it would be 3 more years before Black people had any legal standing and guaranteed citizenship rights. Nationally, Black folks were in the same position that Black people in Oregon had been in. In 1862, Oregon passed a law banning interracial marriages between white people and anyone with more than one grandparent who was Black. This law was expanded in 1866 and added Chinese, Hawaiian, and Native peoples to that ban. That did not mean that communities of color in Oregon did not organize to meet their own needs. Like in Salem in 1867, when the Black children were denied access to public education. The Black community pooled its money together and started a separate school. And after a lawsuit was filed, the city of Salem agreed to take over running it as a segregated school. Portland public schools were also segregated at this time. In 1868, the 14th Amendment is ratified, which guaranteed universal citizenship rights regardless of many factors, including race. And then in 1870, the 15th Amendment passed, which outlawed voting discrimination based on race. Though federal laws supersede state law, states can ratify constitutional amendments to show their support. In both cases, Oregon did not ratify these constitutional amendments until decades after they were passed federally. Over 100 years for the 14th Amendment. The period after the Civil War was called Reconstruction and was a time when the Black communities in the South made advances, partially because Northern troops occupied the South to police the white South. Reconstruction was eradicated in 1877 when the Hayes Compromise gave the presidency to the Republicans in exchange for the withdrawal of Union soldiers from the South. This unleashed a wave of white racist backlash against Black people, epitomized in the massive rise of the terrorist act of lynching. Ida B. Wells was a key fearless journalist and organizer who traveled the country working to document these atrocities and to show the real reason for them was about controlling physically and economically Black communities. Oregon only has one reported lynching, though the Black community says there are many, many more that went undocumented and uninvestigated. In Coos Bay in 1902, a mob of 200 armed white men shot Alonzo Tucker and then hung him off a bridge. The local paper called the mob orderly, and the Oregon Journal called Tucker a black fiend who got the death he so rightfully deserved when they reported the terrorist act. The completion of the Transcontinental Railroad in the 1880s and into the early 20th century brought the first large influx of Black folks to Oregon, who came employed by the railroad industry. In fact, the heart of the Black community in Portland then, about 1,000 people, was around Union Station and centered around the Golden West Hotel, which was started to serve the Black railway workers who were denied lodging in the other segregated white-owned hotels. Black folks coming to Oregon were some of the millions who left the South to escape Jim Crow segregation and state-sanctioned terrorism like lynching during the Great Migrations. The first Great Migration ran from 1910 to 1930, and the second Great Migration from 1940 to 1970. At the end of the migrations, only 7% of Black people lived in the West. Beatrice Kennedy was one of the tireless civil rights activists in Oregon. She helped to found the Portland chapter of the NAACP in 1914, and she was the editor and owner of Portland's most successful Black newspaper, The Advocate. She was one of the organizers who worked to repeal the Black Laws, the racially exclusionary language in the Constitution that forbade Black people from moving to Oregon. Unfortunately, Black people moving to Oregon met the same attitudes and institutional oppressions they were trying to leave in the South. On the books in Portland were laws like those of the Real Estate Board's Code of Ethics that institutionalized redlining, the process of designating a small unwanted section of town as the only place people of color can rent or buy housing. We're often told racist terrorist organizations like the Ku Klux Klan were a marginalized group within the larger society, but that is not the case. The first full-length motion picture, Birth of a Nation, glorified the creation of the Klan, and President Woodrow Wilson screened it to visiting foreign dignitaries in the White House. The NAACP nationally and here in Portland organized to ban the film. At its height, 15% of the American population was a card-carrying member of the Ku Klux Klan. In Oregon, that number was 25%. Pictured here are prominent community members, leaders, and elected officials happy to pose with the Klan. The Klan in Oregon was in fact so powerful they were able to oust one governor and install a card-carrying Klan member, Walter Pierce, as the new governor. The Klan was also able to push the Compulsory School Act, saying every child had to attend public school so that they, the Klan, could indoctrinate all of Oregon's youth. This was later declared unconstitutional by the U.S. Supreme Court. These racist attitudes affected all communities of color. Federal law made it illegal for immigrants of color to become citizens, and the 1923 Oregon Alien Land Bill said no immigrants ineligible for citizenship could own property or do business, specifically attacking Portland's Japantown and Chinatown. But folks make community in the most unlikely of places, like in Maxville, where 60 Black lumberjacks and their families made a home for themselves from 1923 to 1943. Community historian and filmmaker Gwen Trice, whose family also lived in Maxville, is working hard to preserve that history and to share it. Blatant signs of racism remained visible across the Oregon landscape, including a restaurant chain called Coon Chicken Inn, where diners entered through the mouth of a smiling blackface caricature. A restaurant similar to this, Little Sambo's, formerly Little Black Sambo's, is still operating in Lincoln City. There were whites-only signs around Bend, Oregon until 1925, when the Black community protested, saying they knew where they were welcome and that the signs only served to further humiliate them. The city council passed a resolution removing the signs, but segregation stayed firmly in place, both in Bend and in Portland. But communities of color found ways to turn adversity into strength. As in Portland, where the strict redlining created a tight community, the heart of which was North Williams Avenue, which became known as an underground jazz treasure. Many of the national jazz legends played there, and you could hear jazz 24 hours a day. The mentality of control and exclusion that sprung from the white nationalist mindset that founded Oregon was evident in the national order signed by President Roosevelt in 1942 that forcibly imprisoned every Japanese American into desert concentration camps. Most were imprisoned for 3 years, patrolled by soldiers who would shoot anyone who tried to cross the boundaries. At the same time, the wartime effort needed labor, and this led to the government implementing the Bracero program, which brought 4 million Mexican workers into the country to labor under unsafe working conditions, inadequate housing, racial discrimination, and violence from the growers. The Northwest specifically was known for Bracero strikes, and almost every camp experienced the workers rising up and organizing for justice. This need for wartime labor is what created the second Great Migration for Black people. Companies were heavily recruiting Black folks in the South to come and work in factories. This happened in the Kaiser shipyards in Oregon. There was not enough space in the redlined community in Portland to house these workers, so Kaiser brought unincorporated land outside of Portland, threw up shoddy housing, and called it Vanport. With 100,000 people at its height, Vanport was Oregon's second largest city, and it was 40% Black. That is until 1948, when Vanport was destroyed by the Columbia River flooding. The flood left nearly 17,000 people, disproportionately Black, homeless. The Black population in Portland at that time was 2,500. In the 1950s, the United States government terminated treaties with Native American tribes. The government said it no longer recognized tribes as sovereign nations. This is akin to the U.S. saying it no longer recognizes Canada as a nation and instead sees all of its resources up for grabs. This disproportionately affected the Northwest and Oregon tribes. The civil rights movement nationally is marked by the Greensboro sit-in and the Montgomery bus boycott. In Portland, organizing by the Urban League of Portland and supporters led to the Oregon Civil Rights Bill being passed in 1953. Similar organizing work continued throughout the 1950s and 1960s in Oregon, as did it nationally. And we see the same thing nationally as well as locally, that from organizers like Rosa Parks on down to Mamie Till, this movement incorporated the leadership of women. We see a huge blow being dealt to the Black community, though, when construction for the Memorial Coliseum and highway construction was approved in 1956, right on top of the Albina neighborhood, the close-knit, thriving community where 4 out of 5 Black people lived. Thousands of homes were demolished, and an entire community was forcibly displaced. This is the same process we see echoed across the country as highways are being built in the 1950s. But marginalized communities found a variety of ways to fight back. Across the country, there were uprisings in Black and brown communities protesting the treatment people there experienced, the first being Watts in 1965, sometimes referred to as race riots. Portland had 2 uprisings in 1967 and 1969, both sparked by mistreatment of Black youth by the police. And the Black community nationally and locally worked to build as well, as evidenced by the Black Panther Party, which nationally ran survival programs to address the needs of the community neglected by the government. In Portland, the Panther chapter, started by Kent Ford and others, ran a free breakfast program for children, a healthcare clinic, and dental clinic for years. And for this, they were targeted by law enforcement. Another blow was dealt to the Black community when Emmanuel Hospital received federal funding to expand. The hospital demolished thousands of homes in the Albina neighborhood. People were given 90 days to move out and a pittance for their homes and moving costs. The federal funding ran out after demolition, but before construction, and the neighborhood lay devastated for decades. Also in 1970, the Black Studies Department was founded at Portland State University, part of a wave of departments focused on the experiences of people of color, coming from the organizing by students, radical faculty, and the larger community. PSU's Black Studies Department is currently one of the few surviving Black Studies departments in the country. Across the nation in the 1970s, companies abandoned cities to exploit labor in third world countries. Hardest hit were communities of color facing rampant unemployment. Property values plummeted, like in Albina, where housing in the 1980s was assessed at half or less than the original values. The Portland Police Department has been accused of violence and brutality against marginalized communities many times, including dozens of killings by police of unarmed people in the past 4 decades. The opossum incident in 1981, where 2 police officers tossed 4 dead possums in front of a popular Black-owned restaurant, was one of the milder allegations of racial discrimination. In the 1960s and the 1970s, Portland Public Schools started a blatantly racist busing program where only Black children were bused. The Black community also saw the school board begin trying to close Harriet Tubman Middle School, historically Black. In 1982, the Black United Front organized a walkout with 4,000 students, as well as protests at the school board like the one pictured here. In 1988, an Ethiopian student and father, Mulugeta Sarah, was brutally murdered by racist skinheads. In response, communities organized a number of different activities, including organizations, rallies, educational events, and a 1,500-person rally in 1990 in memory of Sarah. When Union Boulevard, the main street through the historic Black community, was changed to Martin Luther King Jr. Boulevard, a reactionary coalition formed to protest the name change and put it on the ballot. The state Supreme Court had to step in, saying that the name change was an administrative decision, not subject to voting, and that it stayed. The Black community had been pressuring City Council to invest in historically Black communities for years. In response, the City of Portland finally began a process of urban renewal. Unfortunately, the end result was that 10 years later, Black people owned almost 40% fewer homes in the neighborhood, while white people owned 43% more. Black families were displaced to far-flung areas, and the community was fractured. The criminalization of Black existence that began before the founding of Oregon as a state continued with the passing of Measure 11, which established mandatory sentencing for a number of crimes. Black communities, especially Black youth, have been disproportionately affected, being arrested and charged more than other youth that commit the same crimes. Avel Gordley, an activist and community organizer, became the first Black woman to be elected to the Oregon State Senate in 1996, and worked to institute a number of progressive reforms, including being part of the coalition to remove Oregon's racially exclusive language from the Constitution, which was finally successful in 2001. This project has enjoyed the support, scholarship, and input of many different places and individuals. I want to thank them all. One of the key individuals is Dr. Daryl Milner, one of the founders of PSU's Black Studies Department. Dr. Milner's groundbreaking scholarship and specifically his mentorship on this particular project were both invaluable. This is by no means a comprehensive timeline. There were many histories that were left out, and there have been many events since 1996 that have affected the Black community. I hope people will take it upon themselves to learn more about the history of the state, which I believe is reflective of the history of the larger nation. Here are some excellent resources and organizations to begin as starting places. I'm Walida Imarisha, and I appreciate you taking time to listen to this. I do public interactive programs with this timeline, so if you're interested, please check my calendar at my website for upcoming events, www.walida.com.
I invite everyone to take a big deep breath, hold, and then breathe out. So our question at hand is, how does the past influence the present? I would love to have a brief conversation around that. Yes, the next slide, Amy Day. Wonderful. How does Oregon's racist history show up today? Monica.
Well, I think it shows up in every way, and kind of, I think a history is like the roots of a tree, right? Like the tree is standing, but the roots are truly our history. So
Yes, beautiful. Thank you, Lovisa.
Sure, thanks for that. Hi everybody, Lavisa Lloyd, she, her, member of the commission. I think it's pretty telling that in really relatively modern history, I mean, 1922, right, is 100 years ago now, and I think that that's when it said that in Oregon, the Klan ousted one governor and essentially handpicked another one. That's not that long ago. 100 years is, not that long ago. That's only, a couple generations back. So, but also, I think it's so important to really put the emphasis here on the pushback, like the constant pushback against this. The rallies, the labor strikes, the creation of Black communities, the Urban League of Portland organizing for legislation, and yeah, I think it was interesting the part where they talk about quote unquote like race riots, like Watts. It sort of made me think a lot about 2020, and I think to a large extent, like that is what we come out of, is a lot of the policing and the light that was shed, the actions that were taken in 2020. So that definitely informs us. And yeah, that we see the same things in Oregon that we see, everywhere, which is disproportionate policing, disproportionate arrests. And we've seen that for a long time. And it's going to be, I guess, on our minds as we move forward.
Thank you so much. Connie.
Yeah, I believe that the history informs like the container, to use some of the like verbiage that we had used before, is like it informs the container that we build. It's completely important that we try not to carry over any of the inherent sort of wrongdoings and behaviors of like Oregon's history, and how that affects policing is, I mean, it shows up every day, and that's why I believe the voters have voted for this commission. And I believe that that is why this commission is doing the work that we're doing, is to, I mean, there's no way to undo the history, but to recognize it and have that inform the future container that we build in order to create future justice, and acknowledge it is a very important piece of that. So I thank you so much for bringing this like video to us.
You're welcome. Thank you so much for that feedback. I really appreciate it. Charlie.
Okay, so, could you repeat the question? I think I have a response.
How does Oregon's racist history show up today?
Yeah, okay, so just like intergenerational trauma, I see that playing out in all the institutions and the people working in them. The struggle continues. Sometimes it just feels like, have we learned nothing, and we're still using some of the same means of trying to make change, like we're doing it harder instead of differently. But someone did say, yeah, we have to be radically different. And I still see that history playing out, even what we're trying to do on this commission. Even though we have quote unquote diversity in maybe cultures and colors, but do we have it in our thinking? Yeah.
That's a beautiful invitation into thinking differently. Thank you for that, Charlie. Yes, Kiana.
So it's like a lot of this is the same. Well, first it's like Oregon, we're gonna make every law and do everything possible to not have diversity. And like so Charlie was saying, but it's still the same thinking in the institutions, in the workplaces, as in the schools. So it's like, now we're gonna fill a diversity quota and we're gonna tell you it's diverse. But then as a person of color or a Black person, then you're working in it and it's like, okay, I still feel the unequal power dynamic. Okay, I still feel like because of my complexion, I'm being placed at the bottom. I still feel like everyone's going to diversity trainings once a year, but when I say I'm experiencing racism here, no one's listening to me. So it's like, yeah, this history, it definitely repeats. And that quote, Washida said about justice and power in the room, those are like going along with diversity. Yeah, so it's so important because yeah, people need to have equal power and voices, and their voices need to be heard to make change. And unfortunately, in a lot of spaces, in most spaces, that's not being done. So definitely happy for the commission.
Thank you so much. Yes. Any other thoughts? This is deep work. Mediate, do you mind sharing again? I just want to go back to that last slide. Because the story in the Portland Tribune, the timeline of the KKK dominates Oregon's politics, there's a link in the slide deck to that story. And it's going to be a five-part story, five-part series. And so I invite us as part of the preparation for us going forward to make sure that I just want to call your attention to this as part of some background reading that you may want to do. So I am going to invite us to take a 10-minute break. I would like you to get up, walk, drink some water, and then come back at 7:57, pretty please. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for returning. Our next slide, I will now pass it to the co-chairs of the subcommittee on community engagement events, co-chair Tirsa and co-chair Christiane, to give a brief update on the progress of the subcommittee's work.
Hello. Okay.
Hi.
Sorry. Hello. Just catching my breath. So we last met on July 18th. The subcommittee of community engagements is in the process of reaching out and partnering with potential partner organizations to have town halls to hear from community members, particularly those mostly impacted from over-policing. These town halls will be scheduled between August 15th and September 30th, and commissioners outside of the subcommittee have also been invited to participate with being member leads for town halls after September 15th. And our next meeting is set for Monday, August 15th. Christian, is there anything you would like to add?
Is that a no? Okay, thank you so much, Commissioner, for that report. Really appreciate that. We will now pass it over to the co-chairs of the subcommittee on research. And I would like to, Sophia and Angie to give us an update, a brief update on the progress of the subcommittee work.
Angie? I don't know where she went to. Okay, well, I will give it.
I'm sorry, I was on mute and I couldn't get off mute, but please go ahead, Sophia, for 1 second. I'm sorry.
Sure. We have worked on a document to collect all of the best practices that's been passed around to all of the members to add their best practices to that document. In addition, we've had a few other commission members volunteer to do some research And that's been coming in and that's being gathered up. I know our new staff member that works with Samir, they've been working on collating all that documentation for the group for our Monday. Is it a Monday meeting? I know I think we canceled a meeting. I have to check with Samir because I don't have my dates up. I think we canceled the meeting on Monday and we'll have it on Thursday. And then we'll have we were extending an additional meeting or at the end. So our group will be doing a little more extra work. There's a lot more work than we had quite planned on doing. Once you start getting into research, you go down so many rabbit holes, and there's just so much more, and it's hard to stop. So that's a good thing for us, right? In a sense that, we're collecting more and more information, and it shows the passion of the members. I think August 8th, I think I'm looking at the message from Samir. He says the subcommittee on research had a meeting scheduled for August 8th, which had been moved to August 11th. And there's some more information there. I had taken a few days off for a family emergency, so I'm catching up a little bit here. So I'll let Angie finish us off. Thank you guys so much.
Thank you, Commissioner Sophia. Commissioner Angie.
Thank you so much, Commissioner Sophia. And thanks. I was having problems with my technology. Anyway, we created a spreadsheet that has the barriers that we are researching, or items that we are researching that we want to make note of. And there's two different tabs in this spreadsheet. One tab is for the subject matter experts, which are academics and organizations that we would like to keep information on. And then the other side, the other tab in the document are other jurisdictions practices that we are making note of. And we are trying, right now we're passing this around amongst the research subcommittee to divide into, or to pair up like information basically. And I think that on this meeting tonight, there was the draft areas of agreement, which staff from the city took the information from our spreadsheet, which there was a lot of information in that spreadsheet, and put that into the draft areas of agreement right now. So, but that is a very draft document right now. And our subcommittee hasn't had a chance to really dig into it just yet. There's just a lot of information. And if anybody has any extra time on the whole commission that they could spare, we would really appreciate it, but we know that everybody's really busy. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Commissioner Angie. Any questions? All right, well, we will now move into a discussion. Oh, I'm sorry, Commissioner Jason.
To the co-chairs, I offered to do Washington, D.C. about a week and a half ago, and I had not heard back from you. Is that something you want me to do or not?
Yes, please, Jason, Commissioner Jason, I am so sorry. I have been meaning to send you an email about back about that, but we just got a little carried away with other items that we're working on because Sophia and I had to present to council. So I'm sorry that I didn't get back to you about that, but yes, please, any help we can receive from you is greatly appreciated. And if you want to talk offline at any time, let me know. But yes, please, if you could do that.
Thank you, great question. Okay, we will now move into a discussion of the draft areas of agreement on barriers to police accountability and best practices in Portland. This document is being discussed for eventual approval at a future meeting and will not be voted on today. It is one of the 3 outcome documents for the fact-finding phase, along with the 2 documents being referred to the full commission by the subcommittee on research. Next slide, please. This is an open discussion. And we ask you to follow our normal discussion rules. Please be brief each time you speak, even though you can speak multiple times. Please be facilitated, and remember that we are now using a weighted stack in our discussions. Finally, please be forward-looking in your comments. Would the co-chairs like to frame the discussion and then get it started?
Sure. Hi, everybody. I'm Libby Lloyd. I use she, her pronouns, a member of the commission, co-chair of the commission during this phase. I just wanted to say really briefly, we do have a new member on the commission with us here today for the very first time, Kiana, and I just wanted to say a big welcome to Kiana, because I know it's got to be really overwhelming just walking right into the middle of everything. So Kiana, I hope you can see us, I hope you can hear us and see sort of all these little waving jazz hands of welcome. And I hope that we get a chance to talk a little bit more, but I really just wanted to say, like, first of all, like a big hello and a big welcome to you. I think is today your first day?
Yeah, it's my first meeting.
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you. Do you want to, wanted to give you like a quick opportunity to just say hello, or maybe you could just tell us like your preferred pronouns just real quick so that we know the right way to refer to you.
Oh yeah, hey, I go by she, her, hers, and I'm happy to be here.
Okay, great. Awesome. Well, thank you so much. Wonderful. Yeah, folks are welcome to kind of shout out Kiana, maybe before you make your comments or something along those lines. Hopefully we can have like a community building session or something and get to know you a little better. But all right, so bringing it back to the document, we so far this phase have been hosting, as you know, a phenomenal number of folks who know the police accountability system in Portland, often like from the inside, and it's been amazing. I think we've gotten so much from it, and the goal of that is to consolidate a lot of what we have learned into a barriers and best practices document that we can use a little later on to see, as we're constructing our new system, just kind of looking back to make sure that we're not recreating the worst practices or the barriers to accountability, trying to make sure we're doing our best to build something a lot better. And co-chairs, to that end, co-chairs have started reviewing those old videos, which if anybody wants to go back and watch them, you can go back online and watch any of our presentations and then member Q&As and review those. We've started to go back, watch those, and then put together what the draft areas of agreement might be in terms of like, what are the things that we're hearing over and over again? What are the things we're identifying over and over again as the barriers to accountability, and then best practices, if any, in the current system. So I think what you see on your screen is the very start of this document, and we'll take a look at this document, I think, a couple more times. Today is not like a day for wordsmithing or anything like that. We're not at that stage. We're more just at the general conceptual, this is what this document looks like right now, and we're happy to take comment about it now, and we're also happy to take comment about it via email over the course of the next several weeks as we're continuing to talk about it, because I think this week is going to be the first week that everyone will have seen this document. So we hope that you're going to have comment and feedback about it, and we welcome that comment and we solicit that comment. So yeah, thanks.
Commissioner Angie, then Commissioner Jason.
Thank you so much. And thanks, Commissioner Lovisa, about explaining this. And this really is our first baby steps into trying to put information into this document. I think a lot of this information came from our spreadsheets, but I'm not totally sure because I did not put this information into this document. As a co-chair of the research subcommittee, and I am so sorry. I need to start with welcome, Kiana. I am so sorry I didn't say welcome to you. I am so excited to have you on this commission. I was at the city council meeting yesterday when you were approved, and I was just so happy. I wanted to stand up and hug you. Thank you for stepping into this role, which is really important and a lot of work, really. And this is a lot of, we work really hard on this commission, but it's really worth it. So, so happy to have you as part of our commission and getting a chance to work with you. But along that line, we all, with the research subcommittee, we're doing this work offline, but then sharing it with the rest of the commission. And we really are hoping to get everybody's input because, each one of us has a very diverse idea of what's going on with the barriers. And we really, this document won't succeed unless we have input from everybody on the commission, I feel like. So thank you so much, everybody, for looking at this document and helping us build it.
Okay, so Angie, I just want to clarify that this document that we're looking at now is it's different from the research subcommittee document. This is like a full PAC barriers and best practices document versus the research subcommittee document.
No, I think this is it is? This is not what the research subcommittee
is. Not what the research subcommittee is referring out, no.
Did not know that. Okay, that's why I'm so confused about it. Thank you. Okay. Okay, so we're going to create something from our spreadsheet that looks kind of like this. Is that correct?
Yes, I think so.
Maybe we should ask Samira for a little input. Is that okay?
Yes,
I'm sorry.
Absolutely. Yes, please.
Yes. So what you just said, Commissioner Angie, is correct. The subcommittee will be developing a document that looks a lot like this for two different documents, one of which focuses on practices from other jurisdictions and whether or not the PAC believes they are best practices or practices to avoid. The second one in the subcommittee will be the one on suggestions and proposals from subject matter experts. And that's also being developed in the subcommittee and referred here. Separate from that is a third document for the fact-finding phase, which is the one that we are looking at today here, being developed directly in the full commission, which is on barriers to police accountability and best practices in Portland's current system. And that's what this is. The only connection that might be helpful is, if someone brings up something Portland specific in the subcommittee, it might come here, but otherwise they're completely separate documents. And this one's being developed at the full commission level. For those who are following along or were members back in March, similarly, we had the community engagement framework developed in a subcommittee referred on. And so that's an example similar to the subcommittee on research. And back in March, the agenda and scope and values and goals documents were directly developed at the full commission level. And that's similar to the document being looked at today.
Beautiful. Thank you so very much.
Thank you.
Commissioner Jason.
Welcome, Kiana. We're glad you're here. We need your help. Hey, Lovisa, Commissioner Lovisa, I was much less able to make sense of our visitors than you were. I'm glad you were listening closer than I was, but I heard a lot of people not answer your 4 questions. And I wonder if you're going to attach names or some identities to these explanations here, and perhaps even go back and give people a second chance. I think some people maybe weren't briefed before they came to see us, and they just thought we needed a pep talk. But it's worth going back and asking them if they have something relevant for us to work with. They may not, and so be nice to them and give them an out. So if they don't have something to give us, they don't need to take up time. Yeah, I guess that's let's get our questions answered. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you, Commissioner Jason. I appreciate that. In terms of like attaching identification to, you know, where did we get these? I totally agree. I think we all agree that there were a lot of great quotes that that came out of having, you know, having IPR, CRC, the, you know, PPA president. There's great quotes there, and I think we're kind of at that stage where, you know, we have sort of the bare bones of a little bit of our document, and we're going to start really like filling it in and fleshing it out. And I think that quotes are going to be a big part of that. And I really like that suggestion about giving people another another bite at the apple if they struggle to answer those questions the first time. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Lovisa. Commissioner Dan, and then Commissioner Catherine.
Another bite at the apple if struggle to answer those
Hello,
questions
good
the first
evening.
time.
I'm Dan Handelman. I use he, him pronouns. I am also with a group called Portland Cop Watch. That's relevant for one of my comments I'm going to make. But I also want to welcome you, Commissioner Olson. I saw you, I was on the call with City Council yesterday testifying about another matter, but another member of Cop Watch was there. And we are glad. I'm joining the other people in the commission being glad that you're with us. So my comments about the document, and then I have a question. My comment and the relevant part of my work for Portland Cop Watch is that I feel that I have some subject matter expertise in this area. I have attended more oversight body meetings than anybody in the city of Portland. I can say that for sure because I've been going to them since the previous review board, PIAC, was around, PIIAC, and then when the CRC, the Citizen Review Committee, was created. I think I've missed 1.5 of their meetings since 2002. And I feel like this entire document reflects only negative things that got said about the system without recognizing some of the good things. And I'm saying that particularly because when PIAC stood for, and you know how I hate to say these things that are acronyms as a word, but that's how it's stuck in my head, the Portland Internal Investigations Auditing Committee. And when they turned that system into this IPR, the Independent Police Review, and the Citizen Review Committee, they threw everything out because people said what a bad system that was. And some of the things that were going on were good, and they got thrown out because people said it was so bad. And I just want to make sure we acknowledge things that are good about the system. So I'm going to read those things off, and I'm going to get to my question. The current system makes policy recommendations to the Bureau. The current system publishes and reports on data. It's not ideal for the way that I like it to be presented, but they do that. The staff people head to the scene when there's an officer-involved shooting. The staff has subpoena power. Now, I've got an update about that, but you know, that's what's written in the code. They have subpoena power. Civilians can do intake investigations and nominally can do independent investigations. There is they have a staff person who's specifically doing outreach. That's their job, is doing outreach to the community. They hold public meetings, and when they hold public hearings about police misconduct cases, and I've sent a detailed document about some of the cases where the police officer showed up, but when they do those public hearings, they take public input, which is, I don't think, done anywhere else in the country. And that's something that the CRC members fought for at city council level to override the auditor and allow public to have input at those hearings. And I think that's something I want to make sure we think about as we move on forward. And I've said this many times before, we found this in other cities, but this system has a mediation program for officers and civilians to sit down and talk to each other one-on-one with a mediator. So those are some of the things that are good practices, not necessarily best, but they're good and things for us to think about. So my question is, and I second what Commissioner Renaud said about where did these questions, these comments come from, because this is part of my question here. It says here, the current system of accountability unnecessarily prolongs the process of imposing discipline for minor violations to which an officer readily admits. I want to know where that came from, and let me tell you why before I finish cede the floor. That there is a thing that's called, I can't remember it, but where the officer is allowed to skip the police review board by saying, yeah, I did that, I'll take whatever punishment you're going to give me. Stipulated discipline, that's what it's called. It's called stipulated discipline. So I don't know who brought that issue to us, but I don't know if that's true. So can you tell me where that came from? Thank you.
Thanks. I think I can respond to that because I think I wrote that down as a note from, I think it was Chief Lavelle who said something along those lines, but I would have to double check. But thank you. Yeah, none of this language is final, and we definitely will review and like just fact check basically everything. And I do want to say thank you so much, Dan, for bringing up the draft, the very rough draft version of this that we have right now primarily focuses on barriers, because we ended up getting just a lot more stuff about barriers, but we do definitely want to include best practices, and we'll include best practices, and I really appreciate you listing those best practices. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Commissioner Lavisa. Commissioner Catherine, and then Commissioner Faith.
Thank you, and I just want to say welcome to Kiana. It's really great for you to join us. I'm really happy the commission or the council is being responsive to our request to keep the membership of this commission as complete as possible. So thank you for being willing to join us. And yeah, my background in this work is really from a civil rights perspective, from being a lawyer who's done a lot of that work over the last 20 or 30 years, including on policing of crowd control, organizing legal observer groups, and figuring out how to use that footage to both in the defense of people who've been charged in those protests, and in general to as evidence of policies that are either not working or are being violated. So that's a little bit about my background. And I would say that I was going to lower my hand because the question I had was really Dan's question about whether there was a separate document for best practices, because I didn't see them here, and it sounds like it's just forthcoming. But while I have a minute, I just wanted to ask, is there like a spreadsheet from which this document was developed? In other words, if we had a question about this, can we go to a raw document to just look at and see where it was derived? I don't know. I remember you all talking about how you were going to go through the past meetings and make notes of those things and capture them. So I just wondered if that's a document that would be accessible to others on the commission. Thank you.
Sure, I'll respond to that. We do have notes. I don't know that we didn't do a spreadsheet format kind of in the same way as research subcommittee did, but I think the important thing about this document is that it's not just what we were told, it's also what our opinions were about what we were told. So you might remember, like, we would have somebody come on, do a presentation, we would have Q&A, and then we would have like some summing up of, here are the things that we are identifying from what they said as barriers or as best practices. So I think this document is slightly different from the research subcommittee in that definitely some of the information that comes from it will be things that are just sort of like facts or direct quotes from the people who we heard from, but it's a little bit more subjective in terms of, we are bringing our lens as commissioners to what are we identifying from what we're hearing as being a barrier. Does that make sense?
Yeah, in that sense, maybe attributing these specific items to sources isn't the right way to go then, because if we're really just trying to synthesize the presentation, then maybe quoting particular sources isn't the right thing to do. I guess I'll just respond in that way. Thank you.
Commissioner Faith. Thank you, Commissioner Catherine.
Yeah, I wanted to respond to that a little bit. I think one of the things that Lavisa, you summed it up well, of that this document is, we're not citing exactly what someone else has identified as a barrier. We're saying, we heard these, and as the commission, we believe these are the barriers. I do think it's important you know, as Lavisa said, we're going to embed some quotes and obviously attribute to whom said it. And then one idea was to like have an appendix of topics that were brought up by different presenters. So not that, yeah, that it acknowledges topics that were brought and who they were brought by, but that we formed our opinions and that's what the document is. So hopefully that helps clarify a little bit kind of the process or the idea of the process.
Any other comments, questions? Commissioner Dan.
Well, I would like to say I really appreciate that this document is already broken into categories, which was something that was it made our work a little easier after we did that at our subcommittee meeting on Monday. So I really appreciate having that. And you know, I'm kind of hearing two things about the attributions. I think for us as commissioners, as we're considering these things to move them forward, I think it's really important to have the attribution where it came from, so we can remember who told us that. So I am hoping this can be added back in for us at least. And I've said this about the research subcommittee's work as well. In the first quarter, when we were setting all our stuff up, we said we're going to use community input to guide what we think are the best practices to design our thing. So we still haven't really heard from the community about anything yet. I mean, we've heard from the few people who show up at the meetings, and thank you for the people who are here tonight. But you know, I want to make sure that we're not narrowing down things too much or making up our minds too much before we start actually hearing from the community as we promised we would. So thanks.
Thank you so much, Commissioner Dan. Commissioner Debbie.
Hi, Kiana. I'm Debbie Iona. I'm a member of the commission, obviously, she, her, and I got here because I'm a longtime member of the League of Women Voters of Portland, and our organization started on this issue back in the 80s when there was a commission called the Stores Commission that created the very first oversight system. And so one member, she was on top of it from the early 80s until 2000, and then she passed it off to me in 2000, and I've been following it since then. So so that's my history, and I'm so glad you're here because we need all the help we can get. But so I would like a little bit better understanding of, so we're going to be working on this thing about the barriers, and it'll get to a point where we, you know, are pretty happy with it. But then, you know, I'm kind of following up on Commissioner Handelman's question. So how, I mean, what are we going to do with this? I guess is what I'm asking. And how does the public interface with it? So if anybody kind of has an answer to that, I would love to understand that. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Debbie. Commissioner Faith.
I don't have an exact answer, Debbie. I think that as coaches, we're building it too. So it'd be lovely if there are thoughts on your questions and you have input, then heck yes, we'd love to know that. And I think in response to you, Commissioner Dan, I hope that I can be clear. In my mind, the document is, and this is in my mind, so please everyone, this is not like, this is my idea. My idea is text that you've seen on the screen that are the commission's opinions, and those texts can be accompanied by an appendix that demonstrates where we might have heard that information from. So if we're in the section of perception or trust, that will be able to point to an appendix where we heard issues on perception and lack of trust. So that's what we've been working through obviously still very much a work in progress, and happy to hear from others if there's a different way to do that. But I think that's the way we thought through, like being able to highlight what the commission presumes rather than what was said to us.
Thank you, Commissioner Faith. Commissioner Debbie.
So, Faith, Commissioner Faith, you asked for my opinion on or ideas. So I guess the thing I can sort of envision doing with this is getting it, working on it till we think it, sounds pretty good and we've captured a lot of different things, and then calling it like a discussion draft or something. Because I think, like, if I'm a member of the public just going cold into some meeting where they're asking my opinions about things, I always like to have something to respond to. Like, these are the ideas we have now. We want your ideas to improve upon, enhance, add to, change. And then you get all those things from the public mixed into what this, this community volunteer commission is working on. And hopefully, by mixing all of that together, you get to a point where you have something that really has broad-based support, and then hopefully city council will like. So that's sort of, I just really feel like I'd like to see this be something that the public gets to add to and respond to. So those are my thoughts.
Thank you, Commissioner Debbie. Any other thoughts? Commissioner Monica.
I was wondering if there is a role for us to also look really carefully at the ballot measure and the mandate that we have to look at, and see if there is some a way to organize also this document in response to that ballot measure, so that we don't deviate too much from what we've been asked to do by the voters, right? That's what I was thinking of.
Thank you. I'm wondering if we can go back to the document so we can get comments on the document itself.
I just want to say thank you so much, everybody, for these ideas. These are wonderful ideas, and this is why we're having this discussion.
Yes, making sure that we're doing this as a forward-looking.
Yeah, and I think also the hope, somewhat to answer Commissioner Debbie's question a little bit, the hope is that, here we're identifying problems. What are the problems with the current system? We're hoping there are some things that are not problems, that are great practices, but in terms of accountability, what are the problems that are preventing us from getting to a place of accountability right now, so that in the future, when we're going on to future phases, we're coming up with things that are solutions to these problems. So I hope that it can become almost like a reference document for us as well.
Thank you, Commissioner Lavisa. Commissioner Sophia.
Yes.
Commissioner Monica, sorry.
Yes, I had a thought. I mean, my thought when you guys first did this was that this was just a compilation of our discussions after all of the guests that we had. That's what I was thinking it was at the beginning. And then, after hearing some of the comments and how Angie's like, oh, we all have a document similar to this. So I'm looking at maybe if we had some kind of format where we did this on, let's say, both the research committee and also the research, as well as the community engagement and the full commission. Then once we get to our community groups, we can start comparing some of those ideas and say, this is some of the things that we came up with when we were going through all of our interviews and our question and answers with some of the other police and commissioners, city commissioners. And what do you guys have? See what's similar, what's additional to that. Because I think the documents as they are good. Just the culmination of ideas in one place. And then that gives us a means to compare and also to share, right? So anyway, that's my thought process. So thank you, guys.
Thank you so much, Commissioner Sophia. Commissioner Monica.
I just wanted to introduce myself to Kiana really quickly because I missed that. So sorry. Welcome, Kiana. I'm Monica, she, her pronouns. I am a midwife in the community. I work in a community health center, and I work with mostly the Latino community in Hillsborough. So I think that's one of the reasons why I'm here. And it's a lot of wonderful work, a lot of time aside from work, and it's very, very, very rewarding. So welcome. I'm glad you're here with us. Thanks.
Yes, Commissioner Sophia.
I have to apologize. I didn't introduce myself. So I'm Sophia Glenn, and I know we saw each other during the city commission meeting, but I didn't get a chance to introduce myself. And we are so glad you are here. And welcome to the work of the people, right? So anyway, thanks so much. We anything you need from us, just give us a call or send us an email. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Commissioner Sophia. Commissioner Tirsa, can you elaborate on your comment a little bit that is in the chat?
Yes, so at our upcoming subcommittee meeting of community engagements, we will be discussing how we will be reporting back to the full commission feedback that we are hearing from our town halls. I just wanted to point that out. We haven't discussed that, but we know that that input is really important. And we will be figuring out how we will be reporting what we are hearing from the community to the full commission.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. Other comments, other thoughts about the document itself? Commissioner Dan?
Well, one thing that strikes me that's not in here right now is kind of legal barriers that have come up, like things that are in state, federal, labor law that are making this, the current system struggle that may not be gone when the new board gets implemented. So I think that would be a good category to put in there. Kind of along those lines, and there's a section called bias where it says threshold for standard of review. I think I would put that in kind of a legal barrel. And I think the reasonable person standard getting interpreted as reasonable officer is not 100% how I would phrase that, but I know we're not wordsmithing tonight, so I'll try to work on that and send you back some more thoughts about that. I'm also thinking, I agree with, and I actually suggested to the co-chairs that we should, at some point, if we don't have time tonight, which we're almost out of time, maybe the next time we're all together, I think we should read through the charter section. It wouldn't take very long. It'd probably take 10 minutes or less. And maybe we can take turns, each person reading a different section of it, so we're all grounded really well in what it actually says. Because I had to reread it a few weeks ago to realize that some of the things that we think are good practices, like the subpoena power and compelling officer testimony, are things that are listed as being available to the new board to the extent they're allowed by law. And that that means that they might not happen unless those laws are changed or we figure a way around them. So I'd like to talk about that. And then two, I'm not sure if it'll be helpful to the full commission or to the people working on this document, but I think I'm going to upload the ordered spreadsheet of the research that we've done so far. And understanding this is a working document, but it was shared at our public meeting on Monday, so it's not like a private secret document of any kind. And you can see the categories that have developed from there that sort of relate to the that charter section that we're working on. Thanks.
Thank you, Commissioner Dan. Anyone else? Commissioner Sophia.
I just wanted to just speak a little bit about Commissioner Dan's comment about to what extent of the law, as I was doing some of the research for research for the Research Commission. That was some of the things that I had come up with when I was talking about some of the best practices with some of the other folks, saying, you know, we need to look into that. So that's just something for the research team as well. But it's just something that we need to think about when we get to that phase. Right now, we're not there, but it's just something to keep in mind.
Thank you. Co-chairs, do you feel like you have received the feedback that you need? Is there anything else that you would like to ask for?
Oh, I just want to say thank you so much, everyone, for these this feedback, these suggestions. We're going to be working on this document pretty intensively over the next couple of weeks, and so hopefully we'll have some drafts, and you know, you can give us feedback, please on anything at any time. We're going to be really happy to take that feedback. And yeah, and I love the suggestions. I think that is everything I have. Faith, I don't know if you have anything else you wanted to mention on this. But
Okay.
thank you so much for the comments. Please keep them coming.
Thank you so much. So we will now take open public comment on the issues the PAC is discussing, or community members can also tell their story about policing and police accountability. We ask members of the public to keep their comments on or questions to 2 minutes in length, and to raise their hand in Zoom if you would like to speak. Do we have any people raising their hands? No? Okay, then we will continue on to next steps. We will now move on to next steps. There is one item which was added to this section by the co-chairs, and I will pass it over to them to explain it.
Yeah, good evening. Welcome, Kiana. I'm Faith Aiken. I use she, her pronouns. I'm here because I care about this, and I guess I represent the disability community, and my hope is that our events and our thought processes are informed and accessible. So welcome. So in the next steps, we wanted to bring to light something that came out of the State Commission on Law Enforcement Standards of Conduct and Discipline. Many of you probably saw the article in OPB. I sent an email this morning around the proposed standards, and currently the draft rules are subject to public comment. So we wanted to discuss with the commission our thoughts on participating in public comment and or drafting a formal statement. So CMOB, Lovisa, and I drafted some positions or wanted to offer some thoughts on the proposed rules. And as outlined in the internal processes document, we would like to draft a formal statement and bring it back to the commission. We would approve it by consensus if it were to be approved, and then we would release the public statement. So that's a little bit of the process. Wanted to just have a discussion about it this evening and see what y'all thought of the article and the proposed standards and how we feel about beginning to draft a public statement.
Thank you, Commissioner Faith. Commissioner Catherine.
Yeah, thank you. I just had a question, and maybe this is obvious to others, but I was just trying to understand the relationship between those standards and the disciplinary guide that got incorporated into the collective bargaining agreement that we've heard about several times. I don't fully understand the applicability of those statewide standards to Portland, especially in light of that disciplinary guide that was adopted through the collective bargaining process. I don't know if anybody else understands that, but I would appreciate that explanation if someone has it.
I'm gonna invite staff in, but also from what I understand, those are two different separate things. But I would like staff to clarify if they can.
Thank you. Not a lawyer, so let me give the disclaimer up front that we will need to get legal counsel for the very specific portion of this, but the commission is designed, the statewide commission is designed to create uniform standards that would apply statewide. They would be defined as they currently are. They would apply as the standard, not as a floor or a ceiling, but just the standard that all jurisdictions would use. Any collective bargaining that is currently in place would be allowed to continue until the end of the current contract, as I understand it, after which point the statewide standards would apply. So if a city does not have a negotiated bargained discipline guide, then as soon as these new rules are put into effect or whatever implementation timeline the statewide commission puts in place, it would apply in that jurisdiction. And if it's a city that does have a bargained contract, as Portland does, then those bargained local standards would remain in place through the duration of the contract. And then after that, the statewide standards would apply, as I understand it. So the city has a contract with the PPA that goes to, I believe, June 30th, 2025. And that is the rough timeline upon which it would apply for whatever the state comes up with. Unless, of course, the state builds in wiggle room, such as these are the minimum standards and local jurisdictions can bargain upward from there or something to that effect. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioner Debbie.
I just have a quick question about process here. You know, I know we're cautioned every time about not bringing up new topics late in the game on the agenda. And to tell you the truth, so I didn't check my city email until about an hour before this meeting. And so kind of this sort of all came as a surprise to me. But then more importantly, I was putting myself in the shoes of members of the public who might be interested in what the activities are of this commission, and maybe they read about this thing and they would have liked to have been here and they just didn't know about it. So I think totally fine that we're talking about the idea of maybe doing something about this, but I think to me we shouldn't get into too many details just because we should save it for a meeting when there's been adequate notice. Thanks.
Thank you, Commissioner Debbie. Commissioner Dan.
Good evening again. So yeah, I have a slightly similar, I do share Commissioner Iona's concerns, but similar to those concerns, I don't know the timeline for this. I just looked at that OPB article. It looks like they're taking comment until September 16. My real deep concern is that as a commission, our task is to advise City Council what the new review board should look like. And this is going to affect that review board sometime in the future. But I wonder whether, if we're going to talk about putting comments in about these guidelines, whether we should give them to City Council to forward on to the state so that we're not becoming an organization unto ourselves that's doing recommendations on things. I understand it's built into our document that we can comment on policy, but it feels to me that was meant for us to make comments to the city council about policy. So I don't know if that's something the chairs would entertain, that if the letter is going to get drafted, that we should consider drafting it to the city council rather than directly to the DPSST. And I'm saying this as somebody who comments to everybody all the time. I mean, but I'm just thinking in terms of our group and our commission. Thank you.
Yeah. I'm Dan, will you say more? I think I understand, but I want to make sure. So, okay, let me try to synthesize. Your recommendation is that the letter would not, like, we wouldn't just make a public statement like, hello, here's our statement, but that we would draft the letter towards city council and ask them to make the statement, or to take the information and do with it what they will.
Right. I mean, theoretically, they have you know, I hate the word use this word, but for lack of a better term, they have a lobbyist that goes to Salem and talks to state legislators and so forth. And we would be, in my opinion, it would be helpful to ask them to forward our concerns on to the DPSST. And if they don't agree with our concerns and they want to change them or whatever, if they're expressing their own concerns, we'll have to figure out how to navigate that. But it just feels to me that, you know, the city as an entity interrelates with the state government through the city council and the this lobbyist.
Thank you, Commissioner Dan. I'm going to invite staff in to comment on this.
Yes, thank you. So there was a recent meeting, a recent status conference of the settlement agreement, which is a federal court case between the US DOJ and the city of Portland. There's a status conference on the, I believe it was the 27th, in which it didn't end up happening, but another city advisory group was able to submit a statement. It was the PSAP, Portland Committee on Community Engaged Policing, was able to submit directly to the status conference. Similarly, as this is a state entity which is discussing issues related to the future oversight board, which the commission is creating, it would be within the commission's right to do so, perhaps with a CC to the Office of Government Relations at the city, or the LESC, which is actually the statewide entity, not the DPSST that's doing it. Whether or not that's a good idea or not is up to the commission, of course, what you prefer to do. But there are precedents in the city for city advisory groups to communicate directly with higher orders of government, the federal government and the state government, directly if they so choose. And the LESC, the Law Enforcement Standards Commission, that's not the full name of it, but that's how they acronymed it at the state, is the name of the entity in question here. The Office of Government Relations is a city entity, which is the, as Commissioner Dan referred to, the lobbyist for the city. So just to clarify the acronyms there. Again, this is not advice. This is just what you're able to do. And it's up to the group where they'd like to send that, in addition to potentially, you know, making it public and posting it online and all that.
Thank you so much. Commissioner Debbie.
So I don't have any understanding or opinion on exactly how this commission fits with state government, but my understanding is that Portland Committee on Community Engaged Policing is a creation of the settlement agreement with the federal government. And so it seems like they're sort of designated to be talking to the court if they can, you know, write a letter. So I don't know if that's a good parallel example, but again, I have no idea about where this commission fits with state government, but I think that the PCCP is sort of, that's part of their job, is to be, you know, paying attention to the settlement agreement and telling the judge what they think. So just wanted to make that comment.
Thank you so much, Commissioner Debbie. I am going to invite Sarah Ames, Deputy City Attorney, into this conversation if they would like to. Sarah Ames, talking permitted.
There we go. I got unmuted. Thank you. Sarah Ames, she, her. That is an interesting question. I have not been with the city long enough to know how exactly city agencies, which you would be, develop a legislative agenda. I don't know that there's, I would have to double check just to see what it does seem quite clearly to me that these folks are making rules about something that directly affects your commission and your design of the new system. I agree with Samir that this does seem like up your alley and that you could make some comments. I understand that some of the questions that you were interested in commenting on are the makeup of the board and or whether there should be a floor or a ceiling, and the statute that established this group said they had to provide uniform standards. So I don't know whether they've interpreted uniform as being uniform, that everybody has to have the same. So there's some interesting issues in there, some of which might require legislative change, in which case I do think that you would be well served to, if you were going to advocate for legislative change, to go through the city's legislative agenda. The question of whether you can comment on the rules is a separate question, because that's not the overall legislative agenda. And it seems clear that the Community Oversight Board, which is designed with a great deal of independence from the City Council, ultimately the one you're designing, would have the ability to decide to comment on rules. So I haven't looked at this question about your current status and whether you could raise a question of like, this seems to be a barrier to accountability in Portland, and we're designing an accountability system and identifying barriers, and this would be one of them. So, which is, I think, the direction you're heading. I can do a little more work on that and get back to you. I'm sorry I didn't come totally prepared for this particular angle. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Attorney Ames. Staff.
Yes, thank you. So just a quick point on the, sorry about that. Just a quick point on the question of the legislative agenda. The legislative agendas for the city are annual, and the next one is going to be figured out in early January is the likely timeline for that. So that's several months after the rulemaking process closes on this. And the public input into the rulemaking process at the state level closes on this. And to clarify the sort of gravity of this, it would essentially say that this would be the discipline guide that the new oversight board would need to implement if it is established as a uniform standard without the ability to deviate locally. Which, as a side note, Commissioner Monica was giving us giving a presentation at the subcommittee on research about the National Association for Civilian Oversight of Law Enforcement on Monday, and it actually spoke to one of the principles being individual jurisdictions having the ability to do that. So that's just a side note there. So it's been talked about by the commission actually twice now, once at the by co-chair CMOB and once actually indirectly by Commissioner Monica. But yeah, it's something that the legislative agenda occurs 4 months after the 3.5 months after the deadline for public comment into the rulemaking process.
Thank you, staff. Commissioner Debbie, you're our last participant for the evening.
So I wonder if it makes sense for this commission to ask City Council to convey our concern to this group that's setting these rules. So it can't be part of the legislative agenda because obviously the deadline doesn't work for that. But I don't know how often City Council communicates with state rulemaking bodies, but if we request that they do it, it seems like there'd be more gravity if the City Council was saying to this rulemaking committee, this is really going to mess things up for Portland trying to make oversight board. Thanks.
Thank you, Commissioner Debbie. Commissioner Faith, are you wrapping us up? Thank you so very much.
Yeah, just want to synthesize what we're hearing. Well, question for maybe some thumbs up. This is something that we care about. Okay, that's good. We're on the same page there. And then we need to strategize in which how we communicate that. So there's really two tasks for co-chairs is A, the strategy, like what's the best strategy to communicate our position, and then B, writing the position. And so that is something that co-chairs will work on and follow back up with communication back to the commission. So thank you all for your feedback.
Thank you. Thank you, Commissioner Faith. We're going to go now to the garden plot. This is a time for facilitators, co-chairs, and staff to summarize any items already brought up today, which didn't fit into today's agenda. We'll recap those items here and use them in developing future agendas. We won't be using this time to add new items not previously mentioned or to discuss any items, but we will use this list to develop future agendas for these items to be addressed. Ayomide, do you have any garden plots?
I do have a few. I'm basically going off of a few comments that I heard. And I think some of that was also reciprocated that it was going to happen, but repeating is okay. So one of the first things I heard was talking about making sure that best practices make the list or make a portion of this document, create a appendix of who said what for better documentation, create an avenue for community input. And then there was kind of a breakdown of how that could be done, text of opinions of commissioners, and then an appendix again for what was said from whom. And then the other big item was take a look at ballot measure, the ballot measure to ensure commission is doing what the voters wanted. Focus on the legal barriers of the commission and read through the charter is what I got.
I agree with that. Specifically the read through the charter and the other ones, and inviting commissioners to look at the categories in the spreadsheet that the research committee is working. Staff, any others?
Nothing that isn't already noted in the comments on the document. Thank you.
Co-chairs, any others? Beautiful. Thank you. All right. Well, that means we are going to come to a close of this meeting. Thank you to all of the members who attended today's meeting and for your contributions today. Thank you also to the interpreters supporting access to this meeting of the Police Accountability Commission and its committee members for all Portlanders. Thank you to coming and spending your time, sharing your thoughts and being part in connection with the community. Finally, thank you to the members of the community for attending and contributing your thoughts and questions. You can give advanced public comment prior to future meetings at tinyurl/Portland PAC comment. You can sign up for email updates on the PAC's work at tinyurl/Portland PAC updates. It is now 9:03 and the meeting is adjourned.